podcast is part of the Sports Social Podcast Network.
This is an ad for Roundup Weed and Grass Killer with Sure Shot Wand. It kills weeds down to the root, so they don't come back. It works for you, your neighbor, your neighbor's neighbor, and his neighbor's neighbor. It's Roundup Weed and Grass Killer with Sure Shot Wand. When used as directed, always read and follow pesticide label directions.
This episode is brought to you by State Farm. Leaving out the avocado in your salad to save money is not good for morale or your fiber intake. Luckily, State Farm knows the value of the little things. It's why they've got options like insuring your home and ride with surprisingly great rates on both. Because you shouldn't have to give up what you love for great insurance. For surprisingly great rates, like a good neighbor, State Farm is there. Call or go to statefarm.com for a quote today.
Slightly weird lighting for those watching on video, and also slightly weird to be wearing a t-shirt with a massive slogan on it that the microphone sits right in front of. It says Santa Monica, for those interested, but if you look at it wrong, it says Sata or Seta. Maybe Satan. Very strange. Anyway, it's the end of day 3 at Roland Garros. In fact, it is into day 4 because it is now well past midnight, 25 past midnight. I'm doing this actually with the Tsitsipas match still going on. I've just not had the stamina to keep going with it. Been a long first few days. Pretty crazy that technically into day 4, as Matt Roberts of the tennis podcast pointed out on Twitter, technically into day 4, and the first round still isn't done, with Tsitsipas and Musetti, as well as Simon and Carreño Busta still going. Pretty remarkable, really. A classic Parisian day, I think some people call this. I started sleeping in late. I don't know if that's classically Parisian, but I did then wait at a tram stop for a tram that never came. Went to a bus stop for a bus that never came. Turns out they were both on strike, but that hadn't really been communicated to many people. So, slightly frustrating start to the day. I did manage to get there in time for Jo-Wilfried Tsonga's final match in professional tennis, singles tennis. He may yet play doubles, depending on his injury. He was up against Casper Ruud, and it was perhaps the best atmosphere I've ever experienced on a tennis court. Maybe only rivaled by when Murray beat Oscar Otte under the roof at Wimbledon last year. But other than that, it was really spectacular. There was a band in. They were playing songs at every changeover, sometimes between points. And what was really nice is not only were they playing songs, in those gaps, but they knew when to stop so that it didn't interrupt or delay play. I think I'll remember the last point of the match for a long, long time. There was a big presentation afterwards and lots of messages and greetings and lots of family on court, which is lovely. But Jo-Wilfried Tsonga, he made such a match of it. He won the first set, Ruud won the next 2, and then he broke at 5-all for 6-5. And the first serve he hit of that service game, his shoulder went. And it was immediately obvious because the second serve came over about 70 miles an hour. And then, he just couldn't hit the ball. He hit a couple of serves incredibly slowly. He hit an underarm serve at one point just to try and win a point, but Ruud broke back. And they went to a tiebreak, which he lost 7-love, which was a shame. But as he walked to the service line at 6-love, the whole stadium was on his feet. And he got to the service line and went in down to get into his service motion, and the noise just didn't stop. And he started crying, and he was wiping tears away from his eyes, and it was such a moment for realising how much this game means to a man like that. And he, the whole match, he had really, noticeably been enjoying it, looking up to the crowd, and just really absorbing what was going on, knowing that he wouldn't get the chance again. Someone turned to me in the press box and said, "Can you imagine what it's like playing in front of this?" And no, I absolutely can't. And I really can't imagine what it's like to have that feeling and know that you will never have that feeling again. Jo-Wilfried Tsonga might come back and play exhibitions and have some fun, but he will never have the feelings that he's had from his tennis career again. And that must be very strange. So it was lovely to be there for that. There was a rumour that Roger Federer was going to turn up he didn't. It was quite well substantiated in the French media, I think. I think because he gave a video message in part of the post-match ceremony, not a live one, and I imagine that someone somewhere has seen that and gone, oh, got Federer, and then that's been Chinese whispered, or beg your pardon, that's been kind of passed on through and convoluted a bit and diluted, and then all of a sudden Federer's going to be here. Yeah, very strange. And then I saw the Netflix crew running around after Paolo Badosa. So looks like if Paolo Badosa wins the French Open, that will be a cracking episode of tennis's upcoming Netflix documentary. Anyway, not much behind the scenes stuff today. Just want to talk about Wilfried Tsonga, really. If you're listening on the podcast, I'll have Calvin with me shortly. If you're watching on Instagram, start listening to the podcast. Well, I'm joined for today's podlet by Calvin Betton, our resident tennis coach, to look through what's been, well, I wouldn't say a dramatic day at Roland Garros per se, although there have been a few pretty epic five-setters, one of which has literally just finished as we are recording. Lorenzo Musetti took a 2-set lead against Stefanos Tsitsipas, the number 4 seed and a favourite to reach the final out of the wide-open bottom half, but he could not see it out for the second Roland Garros in a row. Musetti gave up a 2-set lead and was beaten in 5. Last time it was Novak Djokovic. This time it was Tsitsipas, who won 5-7, 4-6, 6-2, 6-3, 6-2. Calvin, your immediate reaction to that performance from both men, I suppose, but mostly Stefanos Tsitsipas.
Yeah, look, I think the main difference was, and you've got to give credit to Tsitsipas, he's very resilient as a person and as a player. He's tough to put away. I don't think I've ever seen him tank a match. He's sort of quite, he's quite placid, isn't he? He doesn't really lose his temper a great deal, and when he does, it tends to be sharp and short. He'll decimate a racket, and then he's good to go again. You know, he'll do things to stop the match running away from him. He'll take, as we know, he'll take toilet breaks. And Musetti's the opposite. He doesn't strike me as a very resilient character at all.
Well, I mean, the thing where he got beaten by Djokovic last year was technically it was a retirement, and he had the 2-set lead, and I think he retired having potentially been bageled in the 4th set and retired, 4-1 down in the 5th. Which, I mean, we will talk about Wilfried Tsonga shortly, but there was a man who very much could have retired and instead chose to lose 10 straight points rather than walk off the court and end the match early. I mean, Musetti, he's someone you've talked about before, Calvin, he's clearly got a lot of talent. And, he has beaten Tsitsipas and Djokovic in best of 3 matches, effectively, here. He's gone 2 sets up on these guys. I'm not saying, and you always say, Calvin, a lot of the games went to deuce. It doesn't mean anything. Going 2 sets up in a best of 5 match is the same thing. At the end, you lost it. But there must be something there for him to be getting in these positions.
Yeah, look, he's very, very talented. He can play tennis, but he's one of those that when you get past the ball striking, what is left? What have you got left there? And I've not known him since he was a really young junior, but I knew him in juniors, and he's always kind of been the same. He's what I see this a lot in sport. I call them good time Charlies. They're hell of great players when everything's going their way. They can seriously play, and I think Musetti's like that. But when I don't see, again, something that I always say, I feel like I'm quoting myself a lot here, which I hate it when people do. But when I always say that you judge a player by their middle and their bottom levels, and I don't think Musetti's middle and bottom level is that great at all. His top level, phenomenal, hell of a player. His middle level, can he win matches against the best players in the world when he's playing 6 out of 10? I don't fancy him.
It's that classic thing, isn't it? Like, or it's a sign of a champion who wins when they're not playing well, and it's exactly the same thing, isn't it?
Yeah, I don't look. If your plan on any day is to come out and play well, you're always in trouble. The plan should always be, what am I going to do? It's the what if question. Like what if you have your when I've talked with players before matches, it's a question that I always ask them. We always discuss, right, what's the game plan here? What's the tactic? What are you going to focus on? And then my next question is, right, what happens if that doesn't turn out well? And they need to know. And it's almost like Musetti. He doesn't have any plan. His plan is to hit clean winners. And if that doesn't happen, I don't know what he's got in the tank.
Need to find a way to grind. Tsitsipas through to the second round, nevertheless, albeit with a little more energy expended than he would like. He'll be back in action on Thursday, where he will play Zdeněk Kolar, who is a 25-year-old who's into the second round of a Grand Slam for the very first time. I actually think I'm right in saying that he's playing main draw Grand Slam for the very first time. I mean, he has mostly made his living on the Futures and then most recently last year on the Challenger circuit. I mean, I don't know if he's someone you necessarily will have come across, Calvin.
No, I don't know him at all, to be honest.
There you go. Well, I mean, this is uncut, by the way. One of the great things about these podlets, they're completely uncut. So when Calvin says he hasn't got a clue, I just have to go, yeah, great, excellent, really.
It's probably the first time I've ever said I don't know somebody. Like
yeah,
that we've
quite
asked.
possibly.
Yeah.
Anyway, you'd expect him to come through that with relative ease, and then he could face Dan Evans. I mean, I wonder what you think about Evo against Tsitsipas if we get that far. Quite an interesting little matchup, isn't it?
Yeah, it's not a great matchup for Evo, to be fair. It's kind of similar to Musetti today. I thought that Tsitsipas had beat Musetti today because I thought they played quite similar and Tsitsipas is a little bit better. And might happen the same thing with Dan Evans.
Just doesn't quite have the weapons. That was, of course, the last match on Chatrier today. The first match saw Alizé Cornet beat Masaki Doi in a match that I branded pointless. Not pointless in a tennis match, but pointless putting it on Chatrier. Someone said to me, but she's French. But there was no one there. Even the French didn't turn up to watch Cornet beat Doi. But they absolutely did turn up for the next match. Anyone who has seen my video diary will see how excited I got about it. Jo-Wilfried Tsonga playing his last match as a professional against Casper Ruud. We dreamed a dream with Jo-Wilfried Tsonga today. He won the first set, he lost the next two, and he then led 6-5, as I mentioned. Calvin, I've already spoken in the video diary that people will have already heard about the specifics of this match, but the specifics of Jo-Wilfried Tsonga's career, the headline in Figaro this morning was Roland Garros is the story of my life. This match felt like the story of his life.
Yeah, playing great tennis, nearly getting there, and then getting injured. Right, that would sum up Tsonga's career, wouldn't it?
Yeah. Mike Dixon of the Mail pointed out when basically, Tsonga's part of this golden generation of French players, and a load of them came on afterwards to sort of congratulate him and say a few words. And he described them, I think, as a succession of players kept under the thumb by the big three and the big four at various points. I mean, that's probably not far from the truth, is it? All right, some of them, there are more than four players better than them in the world, but were it not one of the great generations, France would have had 7 or 8 Grand Slams in the last 15 years, wouldn't they?
You can say that, but you can also say that about French at any stage during the last 40 years, and they have one total. So Tsonga's a bit different from all the others, actually, because his Achilles heel was Andy Murray.
Yeah,
Andy Murray just seemed to keep knocking him out. I mean, geez, I must have seen Andy Murray play him at Wimbledon about 9 times. Like, doesn't make any sense. They've played each other every year, and Tsonga would always seem to be like 2 sets to 1 up, and Murray would find a way of beating him. But
their head-to-head, incidentally, they've played 16 times in their career between 2007 and 2016. Murray won 14 of them. Tsonga only beat him twice, once in Australia when Murray was basically a kid, and then once in Canada. You know what? I always say at the end of people's career, it's a good time to sum up careers and say, judge it. How would you judge Jo-Wilfried Tsonga's career? In your head, is there still a lot of what might have been? Or did he get everything he could have gotten out of his career?
I think tennis is one of those sports where you always reach your potential. Like, there's not many players who didn't do it. They generally had some sort of weakness, or their bodies, like, we look at Del Potro, and I love Del Potro, but you could have said Del Potro should have had 9 slams or 6 slams or whatever. But playing the way he did, his body was never going to allow him to do what he did. And Tsonga, I think, kind of the same. He was a brilliant player to watch. Like I say, I've seen him live on a few times. I've actually seen Andy Murray play him twice at the O2 as well, I think. I think 85% of the matches I've ever seen Andy Murray play have been against Jo-Wilfried Tsonga. He was a phenomenal player to watch. He was a great athlete. He kind of looked like a power forward NBA player at times. But at the same time, you always thought that body, that physique is too big to play for the physical demands that tennis puts on it.
And he wasn't, he wasn't shredded. He wasn't, and he never has been. He's got what I call the Stan Wawrinka body type.
Yeah.
The little bit of dad bod, a bit more body fat than maybe you'd want. And I mean, they say fat weighs less than muscle, so maybe it was a tactical choice. But you always wondered if he dropped a stone and you're not taking a bit more off all your joints and making life a little bit easier for yourself.
I think Stan and Joe Wilfred are kind of similar, though, in a way, although Stan has 3 slams. They're kind of a throwback to when we hear about this sort of tennis lifestyle that the players led in the late 70s, early 80s. From what I know about Stan and Joe Wilfred, they enjoyed being on tour. And fair play to them. Look, it's like we don't have enough, we're sort of speaking now at a time when there's pictures of Jack Grealish pretty much boozing everywhere in Europe, and it is the same. It's kind of a throwback, isn't it? I guess we don't have their characters.
Yeah, and fair play, as you say. Who's to criticise it? Joe Wilfred Tsonga has made $22 million in his career from tennis alone. He made a Grand Slam final. He made 4 Grand Slam semi-finals, or 5, I suppose, if you include the one that got him to the final in Australia. He's done a lot with his life.
He has, and something about Joe Wilfred Tsonga as well that I don't know if a lot of our listeners will know. He's always played French league tennis as well. He's never not played. And a lot of the French players tend to play it, but every year I tend to keep my eye on it, who's winning the French league, that kind of thing. And Joe Wilfred Tsonga would be playing every year that he was fit. He'd finish the season and then go straight into French league.
And he also, and French listeners will remember this, but many of ours won't, he also won the Davis Cup with France in 2017 when they beat Belgium in a football stadium, which I still remember watching bits of it. And Tsonga, I think he beat Darcy, we lost to Goffin, and then Lucas Pouille won the final match to seal it. And I still remember that and thinking, he's a stadium player. He's someone, and it felt like a football stadium today. It really did, with the noise that was involved. The air completely went out of it when his shoulder went. It was genuinely one of the saddest things I've seen on a tennis court, was just him standing on the baseline, throwing the ball up, and it was old man serving. It really was, just rolling it into the box. It was a great shame. I would say he'll be sadly missed. He won't be, because he's not really played a lot or figured a huge amount, but I know that a lot of British people love watching Joe Wilfred Tsonga. And the casual fan on the street, I reckon if you ask them to name 10 tennis players, just off the top of their head, Tsonga would still appear as one of them. Because he's a guy that people remember watching for his excitement and his style.
Yes, he's had big matches at Wimbledon, hasn't he? That's the thing. He's had big dramatic matches. And I'm joking there, but he always seems to have been playing at like 6 o'clock on a Thursday night against Andy Murray into a 4th set, and what people remember in Britain.
Yeah, very much so. Whatever was on just after dinner, really, when you're all still awake. It was nice that was a competitive match, because there actually weren't a huge number of them on the show courts today. Paula Badosa is into the second round. She battered Fiona Ferro 6-2, 6-love. Similarly, Daniil Medvedev. Facundo Bagnis, God bless him, he turned up, but he was as injured as I've ever seen a man at the beginning of a match. I was pretty blown away that he was still playing, actually, and Medvedev didn't need much excuse to put him away. It was good to see this morning, though, that a couple of Brits in action, well, one at least, Neil Skupski, him and Wes Koolhof are the number 6 seeds in the men's doubles, but they are the leading pair in the world this year. They came through Botic van der Zand-Schulp and the all-Dutch pairing, but obviously Neil has a Dutchman in his corner as well. Calvin, Neil, I think I'm right in saying Neil's never won a Grand Slam. He's certainly never even been in the top 10. If he wins a Grand Slam, he will now be in the top 10. How good a chance have these lads got? They seem to be beating all comers when they want to. Yeah,
they're the most informed doubles pair in the world. So they've definitely got a chance. I think one of who's gone out today, or the 2 Colombian lads have gone out today, who are probably historically the best clay court doubles team in the world. So, I'd give them as good a chance as anybody.
Yeah, thanks to Benoit Paire and Alba Ramos Vignolas, for pulling off a pretty unlikely victory over Farah and Cabal, who, as you say, have won plenty over the last couple of years. So decent that. It brings me nicely on to Benoit Paire, who, I mean, look, Benoit Paire is a natural-born entertainer. His name was being shouted constantly during Emma Raducanu's match on Monday, as it was, because he was on next and they wanted her to get on with it. She apologised to them afterwards for making the match so long. His game ran over. He was playing today. He lost to Ilya Ivashka, which, I mean, in terms of entertaining matchups, that might be one of the highest I can really think of. He didn't have a press conference scheduled because he lost, and they don't. I didn't know this, but I think no one had requested him, so he didn't have to do one. But he said, I told them I wanted one. I didn't have a press conference, but I asked for one. And he walked in, and the moderator now, because the questions start with the moderator these days, said, can you tell me what happened during the fourth set? And he said, you know, tennis is not that easy. Beginning of my season was not that easy. I knew I was not going to play up to par. I would like to talk about Wimbledon, however. I want to know if ATP defends more players or Russia. This is why I want to talk to you guys. We're going to play a tournament without any points. When some people had COVID, we did say, we should cancel the tournament altogether. But then we have 3 or 4 Russian players, including Medvedev, and we're rallying against Wimbledon. I think it's a pity because if we were listening to all the players do not understand this decision. 99% of the players, they want to have points and play the tournament as it was before. So I want to know if ATP want to defend players or Russia. And then there's just sort of a beat as everyone goes, I mean, and he got asked a couple more questions about it. And then someone said, you don't want to talk about the match. Which I just find, like, A, read the room, and B, usually it's the complete other way around in these press conferences. Usually, you know, they get asked questions about stuff they don't want to talk about, and they go, can someone please ask me about the match I played today? The answer to you don't want to talk about the match was, I had no press conference, I had to ask for it. So I'm willing to do so, but since I lost, I was told I couldn't have a press conference, and I wanted to talk about Wimbledon, so that's why I've come in. I mean, credit where credit's due, Calvin. I know Benoit Paire doesn't really give a toss about anything, but, you know, he's come out and spoken his mind, and a lot of players have followed suit today.
Yeah, it looks like it's the mood, doesn't it? There doesn't look to be a single player seen. I think Matt Petrie said today that 99% of players are saying that they wanted ranking points at Wimbledon. I'd say it's 100%. I don't know who's not saying it. I've not seen one player come out and say, I think it's the right decision. I think 100% of them will be thinking that, apart from the Russian players. And I just find it amazing that we're sat here now and the only ones who are sitting pretty are the Russians. They're thinking, fair enough, if we can't play it, no one else takes over us. And Medvedev, I think Medvedev might have said something, might have commented on it. I think I saw earlier. He
was certainly asked about it, and he, I mean, I was in that press conference, and he sort of shifted a little uncomfortably, which is pretty rare. You know, Medvedev's a pretty cool character in press conferences these days because he's too busy being a weirdo. And he said, I really want to focus on Roland Garros because a lot has been said about Wimbledon. But, you know, the ATP decision, not easy to comment. And then he said, and I never thought I'd hear this phrase come out of Daniil Medvedev's mouth. He said, but when I read the FAQs, which I just thought, the idea of Daniil Medvedev seeing this statement and being like, can we just check the Q&A segment? I've got a few... I
just comment on that. I found that when I read it the first time, the FAQs, because they released a statement and then straight underneath the statement was FAQs, and I was like, how can these questions have been frequently asked? You've literally only just released the statement.
That's a very valid point, and I thought something similar. But he basically said that he could see the logic behind the ATP decision because they'd explained it, and he couldn't with the Wimbledon decision. He said, I'm not saying which decision is right, but at least so far as in explaining their decisions, I just found the ATP more logical and consecutive. I mean, he was then asked, you're going to stay number one. Isn't that a bit odd? He's like, yeah, very strange. I need to be honest, I love playing on grass. I will still play on grass. But there are no points. I become number one. Well, great for me. If there are points, I can't become number one. I'm going to be gutted. So it is what it is. I cannot change some decisions. So, I mean... The thing is with players, Calvin, and you obviously know a lot of them, and I'm getting to know some of them, is they're A, quite short-termist, and B, very tunnel-visioned. And the reality is that the majority of them don't like the decision because it negatively affects the majority of them, right? Is that not the case?
Yeah, I think that's the point. That I think the tennis ranking system, although it's the same for everybody, it affects different people differently. And I saw some people justifying it earlier on. I saw Joe Jury, I think, and somebody else might be getting that wrong. It might not have been Joe Jury, I think it was, but a few other people had said people winning Wimbledon is still winning Wimbledon, ranking points or not. But that's fair enough for Djokovic and that kind of player. But what about the players who are no, they're not winning Wimbledon? But I tell you what, third round ranking points would be a huge boost for them, and that kind of thing. And I think that's what we've kind of forgotten. Yeah, look, I'd still be surprised if Djokovic doesn't play it. If the prize money is the same as it was, I still think most of the players who've got a chance of winning it will play it. I still think most of the players who are scraping first round will play it because it's 52 grand or whatever it is that they're not picking up elsewhere. The ones who I think might not play it are the ones who probably be making sort of last 16, and they'll look at it and think, realistically, I'm not getting past that. I think that they're the ones, because they're all right for money. They've got enough money. They probably don't like playing on grass. It's not cheap in London. They get taxed through the nose, and they might think, I tell you what, I'm just going to go to America.
Yeah, and there are options. If the hard court swing obviously starts straight after Wimbledon, pretty much, and I'm sure. I mean, the first week of Wimbledon, obviously there are no tournaments, but second week there are, right?
Yeah, there will be. Although I don't know if there's main tour, but there'll be challenges for sure. There'll be challenges the first week, I would think.
There's always challenges. I feel like that should be tattooed somewhere. There's always a challenger. Yeah, I was just thinking about that week in Wimbledon and seeing if I could see exactly what's going on, but I can't quite. Oh, you know what? There'll definitely be a weird clay court tournament somewhere. There'll definitely be a weird clay court tournament somewhere. So yeah, it'd be interesting to see which of them. The only one so far is Naomi Osaka, as mentioned. Today, a few of them said, I haven't made up my mind. I thought it was really interesting what Denis Shapovalov said. He said lots of things. Partly, I don't know what I'm doing yet. He lost today to Holger Rune. But he also said, I felt a lot of pressure coming in here because I knew my quarter-final points were coming off at Wimbledon and I couldn't earn them back. And I can't think if he was really defending any French Open points. I imagine he wasn't, because he's barely won a match at the French Open, either first or second round. So he will have looked at it and gone, I've really got to get some points here, otherwise I'm basically not going to make a move in the rankings until the US Open. And, he is someone who really could find himself, having now gone out in the first round of the French Open, I mean, he could drop like a stone. Him and Matteo Berrettini, basically, are going to fly down the rankings. I mean, he's already down to number 15 just on the live rankings. If you take off quarterfinal points, that'll take him down probably outside the top 20. And it just, your draw gets harder. It spirals, doesn't it?
Yeah, I think that's the thing. It's not just for Wimbledon. It's how it affects everything else. It affects the players who are really going to benefit from this is the players who had good years last year and didn't do well at Wimbledon. Yeah, so they're the ones who they're going to stay, and everyone else is going to drop. They're the ones. So I saw Shapovalov said something about 50% points. I don't get any logic in that, to be honest. You've got to. I think that's a kind of halfway house that wouldn't make any sense. Then you're just playing basically like a Masters series or something points. And I know from what I'm hearing from a few players and camps and that kind of thing, this is still not a closed book yet. I don't think that there's still moving parts on this. Whether it will change, I don't know. But
certainly, I had a couple of conversations today with some pretty well-placed ATP sources who were, very much. I basically said, is this a done deal? Brexit is not a done deal. And he said, well, they both said, to be honest, no, by no means. Like, we want to, because they want to leave it open, because they want to leave it possible for Wimbledon to turn around and say, actually, we'll let them in. So in that sense, they're kind of saying, no, it's not a done deal, and things can change. I think what's crucial is what the players do in the next week or two, because they, as you say, Calvin, they're all pretty much against this. They all think it's nonsense. So what they need to do is gather together and say, if only they had some sort of representative body who could stand up and make a statement on behalf of them. Like, I'm sort of joking, but I'm also not. Like, this is why unions exist. And if I was running, like, the PTPA, for which people, if people who don't know, it's a union set up by Djokovic and Pospisil and a few other people a few years ago. They claim to have over 350 members, and bearing in mind, just to be a voting member, you've got to be either top 350 singles or top 150 doubles. So, that's a pretty high percentage of the people involved in tennis across the two tours. All of whom, as far as we can tell, are fuming at this rankings decision. 4 days have passed now since it came out, and the PTPA have said absolutely nothing. Now, they technically have no power on tour because they're not a recognised union. They are a disruptive union. But if you want to be a disruptive union and a force for change, you have to really, jump on the second serve when it's break point. And in terms of opportunities for a union, that is what this is. Yeah. The governing body has made a decision, and your entire membership is up in arms about it. Look, they may be doing things behind the scenes, but that's not where big progress is made, I'm afraid.
No, they've been rubbish, haven't they? I mean, even Djokovic's statement yesterday. Funniest thing was Djokovic's statement when he was, I don't know if it was a statement or whether he was talking about in a press conference. And for 2/3 of it, I thought, okay, Djokovic's starting talking sense here. He's seeming like the politician that he wants to be. And then he said something like, there are other options than taking the Russian players out. He said, I've seen documentation where other options was offered. And I was like, okay, now we're getting somewhere. And then he went on this ramble about Russian and Ukrainian players playing mixed doubles together.
Yeah, I mean, that was potentially the most tin-eared thing I've ever heard.
Yeah.
Because also I think that was the same day as Lesia Tsurenko, who was beaten in the first round by Iga Świątek. And she pretty much had the whole press room in tears by giving this testimony of how hard her life had been, and she wanted to go home and she couldn't, and she didn't know where she was going to live anymore, either outside the Ukraine or back in Ukraine. And you combine that with Marta Kostyuk, talking about the sheer anger of the prospect of playing against Russian players. Tsurenko herself said she doesn't feel good the idea of playing against Russian or Belarusian players. She wouldn't want to do it, and she's just going to have to cross that bridge when she comes to it. The idea of them playing mixed doubles as some sort of match for peace, just I
will say, if they're hoping, if the ATP are hoping that Wimbledon's going to change their mind, I think there's more chance of Wimbledon allowing players to play in black shirts this year that there is. Wimbledon are, I'm trying to think of the best way of saying it. They don't have their finger on the pulse of what people are thinking. That decision was clearly made in some oak room in the grounds where they thought this will send a statement, and they didn't read the room initially, I don't think, or enough. And I don't think that, I wouldn't be surprised if the people who make the decisions at Wimbledon are even aware of the discussions that are going on. They're quite removed from the reality of the world.
I mean, it is an entire place that is quite removed from reality. Let's be totally honest about it. Look, this story's going to go on and on. We're going to record a full-length pod tomorrow night with George as well, who will have more about that, as much about it as we do, and more, because he's a very well-connected man with lots of ears to the ground. And things will have evolved, because that's how fast this is moving. Tomorrow we have Angelique Kerber opening up on Chatrier against Elsa Giacomo, who is not sponsored by the clothing brand. That really is her name. She knocked out Heather Watson, but I suspect Angelique Kerber will make short work of her. Alexander Zverev against Sebastian Baez, absolute belter coming up third on Chatrier. Belinda Bencic against Bianca Andreescu. I mean, Calvin, that 3 years ago, that's a real big match. I think the way Andreescu's recovered is still a big match, isn't it?
Yeah, I think that's a really interesting storyline, actually. She looks like she means business. This is the best I've seen her. Yeah, Andreescu. She looks like she means business, and this is the best I've seen her since she won the US Open. And I think she's a serious player in the draw if she gets enough matches in. I don't know, was she in the same half as Świątek?
No, she's in the bottom half as well.
Right. So. If she can make the final, that's Świątek's biggest challenge, I think, in the whole draw.
I mean, clay's not traditionally her best surface, right? I mean, I think she's almost never played on it, really.
Yeah, but she would be. I don't see any reason why it wouldn't suit her. She's got great hands, great skills, drop shots, that kind of thing, plays the angles. They're the type of player who clay would suit. I don't think that would be a problem. And she looks she's literally on my screen as we're recording this now, and she looks focused. She's looking good. If she stays fit and she gets the matches, she's a big player in this draw.
Bit of talk as well about how she's added a bit of muscle mass over, so she's got a slightly different body type now. I don't know whether that's just she's a bit older. She was very young when she won the US Open, and there was obviously still physical developing to do. But hopefully that might counter some of the injury problems. We talked about Joe Wilfried Tsonga and his body type and injury problems, so who knows?
Yeah, I think the thing with Andreescu though is when I was in the bubble at Wimbledon last year, I've sort of not spent time around her as such, but I was sat near her on the bus a few times and sat near her over dinner and that kind of thing, and she looked like she was kind of a bit spaced out and didn't care, but just content with not winning enough matches, and it's just something that struck me. And now she looked completely different. She looks back to what she was like at US Open 2019.
Correct. Exciting stuff. Maybe that's a good moment to stop. Also, because
can I nip in there? I just want to mention quickly, like, these night sessions are not really working, are they? They're finishing too late, and they need to. It's also, I was thinking, you really want to be playing at night in the middle of May in Northern Europe? It's not warm out there. No,
and there are no crowds there after about 10 o'clock. I don't understand why they're starting at 8:45, and I don't understand why Chatrier starts at 12. When every other court in Paris starts at 11.
Yeah, they're going to have to sort the schedule out next year. This is not going to work.
No. Just like me chucking a whole glass of beer over the rented desk in my Airbnb isn't going to work. I've managed to put it like, that's where my passport is, that's where my Eurostar ticket home is, it's where all my receipts for expenses are. Couldn't have done this any worse, really. Anyway, we'll see you tomorrow. Things can only get better.
Sports Social Podcast Network.
AutoTrader makes buying a car easier than ever. How? With the largest inventory of new and used vehicles, AutoTrader lets you shop for cars by monthly payment, so you know what you'll pay before you buy. And you know the prices are good because they're backed by Kelley Blue Book. Finally, it's easy. Start shopping at autotrader.com/finally it's easy.